managing information from inside and outside the gun. If you want the whole story, you've got to do both. If you start making trade-offs, well, I'm going to do fingerprints, but I'm not going to do NIBIN or IBIS or ballistics, and I'm not going to do DNA, and I'm not going to do this today, you start depleting your investigative senses. It's like saying, I'm going to cover one eye, put one arm behind my back, lift one leg up in the air, and eventually you'll be just a head on the table watching the crime go around you, unable to respond. So without further ado, I'd like to set the next panel. The panel moderator is a man named Pete Gagliardi. He's a mean old guy. That's me. First panelist, General Liza Sabong, Philippines National Police. Liza is the director of the PNP's Crime Lab. She's a member of the Integrated Chemists Association of the Philippines. She's the president of the Christian Officers of the Philippine Police Service Association. Her areas of specialty are forensic chemistry and toxicology. Our second panelist is Judith Mowat, Jamaica Constabulary Police Force. Judith is director of the Forensic Science Laboratory in Kingston, Jamaica. She has more than 20 years of experience in forensic science, and her PhD is in toxicology. She is an adjunct professor in forensics at the University of Technology and lectures at the University of the West Indies. Jeanette Henriksen. She's with the SKL in Sweden. She's a forensic expert responsible for the Swedish leg of the Scandinavian IBIS network. For the past 11 years, she has worked in firearms of the Swedish National Laboratory of Forensic Science. Martin Parker, National Ballistics Intelligence Service. Martin serves as the lead scientist for NABIS and has worked in forensic science for the last 22 years. He started with the Home Office Forensic Science Service as a firearms expert, and he has served as scientific support manager for the Cumbria Constabulary, managing crime scene investigations, forensic submissions, and covert surveillance. Lastly, Lauren McCauley, Calgary Police Service. Lauren is a forensic firearms examiner with the Calgary Police Service, with Calgary operating the only municipal-based IBIS system in Canada. She is developing new CYBIN protocols. CYBIN is the Canadian Integrated Ballistics Information Network. She is developing new protocols to process firearms and related evidence. We'll start with General Sabong.
Morning. I am General Liza Sabong, the Director of Crime Lab. Okay. As a backgrounder, in 2008, the Project Management Office of the Philippine National Police developed a 3-year acquisition program for the procurement of IBIS for the year 2009, 2010, and 2011. The idea was to have a database on crime evidence only, which enabled the PNP to link ballistic evidence recovered from the different crime scenes. And eventually, we'll go to a licensed firearm database, which contains owner information. If recovered evidence is from a licensed firearm, this will enable the PNP to trace the owner. And the idea was also to encode juridical and government-issued firearms under our National Firearms Control Program which no less than the President of the Philippines is very much interested, and had a budget of 683 million for the procurement of IBs. So this is only a simple protocol in the ballistic examination. If we have a hits in the lab, we release an IBs report. We give this to the investigator on case, act on the investigation, conduct investigation, and file appropriate charges. The PNP acquired IVs on December 10, 2010. We began our full operation on March 2011. And the database contained crime evidence and test firearms from amnesty guns and selected licensed firearms. So we have a bang of 92,000 records entered the IBs. And we have a 2,073 confirmed hits as of May 5, 2013, broken down into fired cartridge cases, which we have 1,923, fired bullets of 150. And we were able to identify 116 firearms involved in various shooting incidents, criminal case confiscated from suspect 96, with our amnesty program 14, and new guns that were licensed 6 were involved. And recently, before flying to Montreal, in our daily newspaper, gun links honor to a 7-year-old murder. I would like to borrow the quotation of Peter Gallarde that every gun has a story to tell. I would like to tell the story that this is a murder that happened in July 15 of 2006, with the victim sustained a gunshot wound in the abdomen. The police gathered evidence, one bullet fired, 8 pieces of 9mm fired cartridges. The owner of the gun availed of the amnesty program in October of 2009, and the gun undergo ballistic testing and stenciling of the serial number of the firearm. And with the IB's examination, it revealed that the gun links the owner to a 7-year-old murder, and appropriate charges was filed against the owner of the gun. So we're very thankful that we have an IB's equipment in the Philippines. Our major accomplishment through our IB's operation, the IB's correlated evidence bullets and cartridge cases of 40 shooting incidents happened in the National Capital Region, in Region 3, which is in Pampanga, Region 4A in Laguna. From 2005 to 2008, involved 93 victims, of which 40 were killed, 34 were wounded, and several other victims whose condition remain unknown. 11 firearms were repeatedly used in all these cases, and one of these is a licensed 9mm Glock 19 pistol, which was linked to 24 cases wherein 18 victims were killed. This will be expounded by Colonel de Guzman, who will do lectures tomorrow. For the major accomplishment of IBs, the PNP won the 2012 August Ballmer Forensic Science Excellence Award. I was the one who received the award at the 119 International Association of Chiefs of Police last September of 2012 at San Diego, California. The award was based on the significant accomplishment of the PNP Crime Laboratory in firearms identification and IB's operation that led to the successful investigation of cases involving firearms. At this portion, I would like to thank Mr. Robert Waltz of the Forensic Technology Incorporated, Mr. Peter Gallarde, Paul, and especially Mr. Boyet Espino for their continued support on the Philippine side on our IB's equipment. Thank you so much. Mabuhay.
And congratulations on winning that prestigious award. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Judith.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. I can't see it from here. Which one of them is mine? Good. In my presentation today, I will describe the crime landscape in Jamaica. Now, as you know, Jamaica has been described as, outside of our shores, as the little island paradise. However, inside our shores, we're having quite a large challenge with armed gangs that operate inside our borders. This has posed a significant challenge to law enforcement. And in my presentation today, I would like to illustrate and highlight some of the steps that we're taking to take our island paradise back. In terms of impact, Jamaica has a population of about 2.7 million persons, but we have an incidence of gun crimes that is disproportionate to the level of our population. For the period 2003 to 2012, the firearm was the main weapon used in the commission of most crimes. But the important stats here is 75% of all the murders committed on the island were committed with illegal guns. In terms of gun involvement, in the last 10 years, we have had approximately 10,500 persons murdered. And in terms of robberies, we had just under 18,000 that was committed with the aid of guns. This is due mainly to the activities of gangs operating on our island, and it is estimated that 80% of our gun crimes is committed by gang members. In one major incident in 2010, several gangs combined forces to take on our law enforcement. And in a fair standoff that resulted from that incident, these were the weapons seized from the gang members after the operation. Even though we knew they were in use during that 2010 operation, it took us another 2 years to recover these 50 caliber rifles that were used against members of our security forces during 2010. We recovered them on June 9th, 2012. In that same West Kingston operation in 2010, we recovered 16,000 rounds of ammunition from the hands of the gang members that were operating. So this is gives an idea of the scale and the challenge which we're up against in Jamaica. Against this background, the Jamaican government in 2006 decided that they were going to invest in IBIS in the hope that IBIS could provide information that would lead to investigated leads. But most of all, it recognized the tremendous value of this information, and it was decided that all possible measures should be taken to ensure that the data is utilized in the most efficient way. We have had some successes with our IBIS. So far, we have entered just about 38,500 images onto our system. And every week, we produce an IBIS hit report that's submitted to the Police High Command. Because of the information gleaned from IBIS, we have here illustrated one firearm that was featured in 16 murders in 2 years, including one incident where at least 5 people were murdered in the single incident. We also have another event in which 2 armed gang members were killed by the security forces. From that incident, the security forces, the police recovered 2 weapons, a Taurus pistol and an AK rifle. The Taurus pistol was linked to the murder of 32 persons in a 4-year span that occurred in the St. Catherine South and the St. Catherine North Division. The AK rifle was linked to the murder of 15 persons in 5 different incidents. So between these 2 firearms, a total of 47 persons were murdered and 4 shot but not killed. There were 24 IBIS hits between them, but without IBIS, we wouldn't have been able to make these links. In response to the police request to do more and give us as much information as possible, we're developing a software in-house that will enable us to put the information together and communicate with law enforcement in a more efficient and effective manner. Simply called AREA because it's an acronym for all that it's capable of doing. The features of the software is a tier structure, mapping, analytics, and notification, its main features. The tier structure will be several layers. This illustrated here would be the dashboard, as we call it, and this is the view from the forensic lab where we will input the data regarding the IBIS hits, the information from the investigators, and all the forensic data, ballistic data that we have on the firearm submitted. This will be the view for the high command, and here we hope to give them information not just about the hits that were taking place, but give them the distribution across time and across distance, so they will be able to get the information as they are happening at the national, divisional, and local levels. They will also be privy to information that is not viewed by the officers on the street, and they will be able to get additional information. We're also going to provide additional information like the type of firearm that's in use and their country of origin. This is what the investigator will see. In the investigator's view, we'll take it down to the street level, and the links will be mapped to various locations in their divisions on the street, and they will get the links to which they are related. One of the benefits of this software, we hope, would be mapping, where we'll be able to plot links as precise points on the map. The investigators should be able to zoom in on location and hopefully identify hotspots, and in doing so, increase the local knowledge of the law enforcement officers on the ground so they can respond in a more efficient and productive manner. Instead of just producing raw data, we're hoping to provide stats, establish trends, and provide analytical reports so that the software itself will analyze the data and produce intelligence as against just providing information. It is hoped that the information generated will be sent to the police officers on their smartphones and on their tablets, so they will get notification of the links of the cases that they're investigating in real time. And of course, we're going to use wireless handheld technologies that's widely available to make that happen. The benefits from the system should be the easier tracking of links, more efficient and effective communication from us at the forensic lab, and a shorter turnaround time in that we are going to send out the notices in real time so that as soon as a hit is made, the officers will be informed on their smartphones, and reduces the lag time between an event occurring and the investigative lead being communicated to the officers. But one of the things that we're hoping to do is that we're also going to connect different types of forensic evidence to this software system. So in the future, we'll link DNA evidence and fingerprints so that the DNA evidence and fingerprints that links different crime scenes will also be communicated to the investigators, and the links across crime scenes will become more apparent, especially if ballistic evidence is already there and those links have been established. It will be the same platform for all three types of forensic evidence: DNA, ballistics, and fingerprints. In short, we're hoping that AREA will change the way crimes are tracked, analyzed, and investigated. And that's it from Kingston, Jamaica. Thank you.
I'd like to learn more about area myself. This sounds very interesting. Very interesting. Jeanette.
Yes, good morning. I woke up with a terrible voice this morning, so I hope at least you can hear me and my voice will hold for the whole presentation. Well, I'm going to briefly talk about the various forensic process the Swedish police work with to extract the useful data from firearms and the protocols and database we have to control it. I will start with giving you a quick look at how the Swedish police organization works. Under the Ministry of Justice, we have the National Police Board, which has 24 authorities, of which 21 is police authorities, geographically divided throughout the country. And those 21 police authorities are the one who's responsible for the crime investigations throughout the country. The SKL, the National Laboratory, where I work at, is an independent expert organization operating under the auspices of the Swedish National Police Board. SKL are responsible for the forensic examinations like the DNA, fingerprints, documents, and firearms, for example. And it's also national responsible for a different forensic database. So what I'm going to talk about is, of course, the process that includes firearms. Basically, what information does we want to collect, the information we want to collect from firearms? The gun serial number is, of course, central of tracing a gun, along with the manufacturers and, of course. Within the Swedish borders, the police authorities, they handle the tracing themselves through different owner databases and the records of stolen weapons. And internationally, we have functions operating under the national police boards that investigate what roads the firearms have gone through to come before they came to Sweden. As you all know, the importance of linking the gun directly to persons and linking crime scenes together, it's one of the important things. The DNA, fingerprints, bullet and cartridge cases found on crime scenes, and the gun itself, it's a key issue for that. SKL have various databases to help to establish those links between the gun and the person who have been in possession of the gun and to the crime scenes. So if you start with the ballistics, in the direction of the police, the Swedish police, it states that all firearms must be sent to my laboratory in Linköping for be test fired and entered into the national database. Also, all cartridge cases and bullets must also be sent to SKL to be entered in the same databases. Since 2002, our case files are entered into the IBIS system that we share with Norway and Denmark. So everything that's entered into IBIS in Sweden will automatically be searched through the Swedish, Norway, and Denmark common database. And then we have the IBIN network, of course. It's upon request from the police authorities or from the National Police Board that they want us to get the search for IBAN. So it's not something we do automatically, just upon request. And then I go to the DNA. Of course, before test firing a weapon that's seized in a crime, we have it tested for the DNA and fingerprints first. Any DNA found on a gun will be searched through the DNA databases nationally. It's the crime scene sampling database that's a DNA where we store all the DNA found on crime scenes and not linked yet to a person. And then we have the suspect database. It's where all the DNA from persons who is suspect for a crime that can gives at least a sentence to prison. And the third database is the convicted offender database. It's a database where all persons that have been convicted for a crime that can be sentenced to prison will be enter the DNA. And the DNA will be there for the whole time the person is in prison, and for 10 years after that, until it will be removed. From this summer, it probably we also will have the start of the PRUM agreement, which is an agreement between the European Union states about automatically search of automatically exchange of the DNA, fingerprints, and vehicle registration databases. So it's under construction yet, and it probably will be launched from this summer. The DNA databases within Sweden are controlled by the Police Security Act and states everything for it. And lastly, we have the fingerprint database. It's national so far. It's a IFFS database, which works also that we have fingerprints found on crime scenes with no suspects on it. And then we have suspect databases too. Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeanette. I'll follow up with a question I have for you after the panel is completed. Martin.
Good morning, everyone. Can you all hear me okay? Okay, what I intend to talk about this morning primarily is the recovery of DNA and fingerprints from firearms, and in particular the experiences of the UK's National Ballistics Intelligence Service in that area over the last 4.5 years. But just sort of starting off, a little bit of the background just as to what NABIS actually carries out. 4 hubs in England and Wales, 3 hubs in England and Wales, based in Manchester, Birmingham and London, and then 1 in Scotland. Those forensic labs are all linked together by the IBIS system, and every cartridge case, every bullet, every firearm which actually comes into possession of police in the UK actually goes to those labs, automatically put onto the system and checked to see whether there are any potential links. We also utilise the IBIN system, and I'll put in a plug for Jeff. It's an incredibly useful ability to be able to search against mostly, obviously, other European countries that are on the system, and we do that on a purely intelligence-led basis. So if there's anything to suggest that a weapon may have been used abroad in one of those countries, then we will automatically carry out that test. That's a list of all the things really which NABIS carries out, but what I would focus on is to say we carry out a lot of the work which I'm sure all your labs do in terms of actually developing those links, those ballistic links between crime scenes, between weapons. But the two crucial additions, which I think give NABIS a bit of an edge. We have a dedicated intelligence cell, which actually takes all that linkage information and actually produces then intelligence packages, and those are sent out to investigators, and that drives forward the actual intelligence which is generated, drives forward investigations. And I think that's very important, and you saw that yesterday clearly in the presentations that were given on operations like Smollen, Présente, Lapworth, and how that actually works. Third part of NABIS actually is what's called knowledge and comms, or could be called prevention. And it's very interesting, the keynote speaker this morning talking about legislation. What that actually enables is we can take empirical scientific evidence that's been generated by NABIS and use it to advise legislators on things which need to change. And a good example of that at the moment is we're seeing quite an increase in the use of antique firearms used in crime in the UK. They're very difficult to get hold of, firearms in the UK, so they're resorting to antiques. But we can therefore pass that on to legislators and suggest that they may need to look at changes. Okay, focusing on the fingerprints and DNA. Firstly, looking at firearms, and I'm sure in common with many of you, we use superglue fuming and then enhance any marks that might be actually produced using fluorescent dye and powders. Overall results are pretty poor. I don't know whether you all find this, but you would expect perhaps with a firearm that there are some quite good surfaces for actually getting fingerprints from, but it's not always borne out. But we think that possibly what is significant is the way weapons are actually handled and made safe and things like that before they actually come into the laboratories. And in the UK, because most police officers aren't armed, when a firearm's actually recovered, our specialist armed officers will actually go to the scene and make weapons safe. And we think that that may be an introduction of contamination and reduce our effectiveness on fingerprints and DNA. So there is a bit of an experiment going on at the moment in the Metropolitan Police where they actually recover the weapon without making it safe, put it into a lined ballistic bag and remove it from the scene to a lab where it can actually be then examined for DNA and fingerprints under controlled, sterile conditions. And certainly the initial results that they're producing would seem to suggest you get a significant increase in both DNA and fingerprint evidence from the gun if you actually carry out that procedure. Fingerprints on cartridge cases, well, this has been a bit of a chestnut for the last, well, God knows how many years, and whether you can actually obtain fingerprints from brass cartridge cases. Most of the time, supergluing still goes on brass cartridge cases, but as a result of that supergluing, you're probably talking one identification in 40 years in the UK, which has actually moved an investigation forward. I'm sure you'd agree that's not a particularly good success rate. In fact, it's even worse because that mark wasn't identified by supergluing, it was actually a mark in corrosion. So what we're now saying is really look at your cartridge case and see whether there are any marks in corrosion. If there aren't, you are extremely unlikely to actually produce any by using superglue enhancement. There is a method that some of you will have heard of, developed by a guy in the UK called John Bond, and that actually enhances marks in corrosion. What I can say of that method is scientifically it is valid. You can see why the method works, but thus far we've produced no identifications in actually using it. Now that may be due to our UK climate, that people don't sweat a lot and don't put a lot of salt into their fingerprints. Also, most of the ammunition that we see tends to have been through a lot of hands, so it's not actually fresh ammunition actually out the box. But as I said, we've had no real successes with it at the moment. There is a company in the UK called Consolite, which can actually look at enhancing corrosion marks on cartridge cases. But I guess the important thing to say is there's no conflict with DNA. You can't rub those marks off if they're there in corrosion. So our advice is don't bother with conventional fingerprinting techniques. Go straight to DNA. In terms of DNA on firearms, obviously Henrik's presentation covered this in quite a bit of depth, but we swab separate areas and we photograph those areas, sights, grips, hammers, muzzles, etc. Interesting, the comment about how important it is to actually swab the muzzle. We quite often get suspects' DNA profiles off the muzzle. some of our criminals seem to want to put the muzzles of guns in their own mouths. Quite why they do that, I don't know, not very bright, but we do get DNA profiles from that. So I would definitely reiterate the importance of swabbing the muzzle. Swabs are quantified and they are kept separate. And I think one of the real bugbears of DNA profiling, and already in some of the questions and answers this morning that's been illustrated, is the curse of the mixed profile. So by quantifying and keeping the swabs separate from separate areas, we try and minimize the chance of actually getting those mixed profiles. But even doing that, we do end up with a problem where a lot of the profiles we obtain are mixed. And I'll talk in just a little bit about how we go about improving the results from that. Most of our DNA is done on a system called SGM+. It's a standard 28 amplification profile process, but again, results are fairly mediocre. On cartridge cases, we actually swab the entire cartridge case. We haven't been able to get this full immersion buffer system working. But I think after watching Henrik's presentation, we probably need to go back and have another go at that. One of the things we have found is that in terms of obtaining DNA from cartridge cases, you maximize your chance if you swab as soon as possible after firing. And that's particularly true if you have the sort of third, fourth cartridge case out, because the heat starts a degradation process. We use specialist swabs and we use buffer, and that also enhances the results, but it's not critical. Using all that, we're still only talking less than 1% of cartridge cases giving a full profile that can be searched against the database. But nevertheless, there are ways that you can enhance, both from cartridge cases and from weapons, the DNA that you can actually get. Additional amplifications of the DNA can sometimes actually yield profiles, but again, they do tend to be mixed. We also use a system called Minifiler. Some of you are familiar with Identifiler. It uses some of the alleles from Identifiler. It uses some from SGM+, but Minifiler works particularly well on degraded and poor samples of DNA, so it is quite useful on cartridge cases. We have a gentleman called Professor, name's just gone, I'll remember it in a second, but there's a professor in London who works at the Royal Society for Statistics who is looking at a computer program to actually give interpretation of mixed profiles. Professor Baldwin, I knew the name would come back. This is yet to be scientifically validated, but it shortly is to go through a validation process. And hopefully that will actually enable sort of likelihood ratios to be applied to mixed profiles. And that's, I think, probably a bit of a holy grail in terms of interpreting the mixed DNA results that we tend to see. By using all these methods, and one of our police forces, Merseyside, has been using all these enhanced DNA systems, they now reckon that they are getting 8 to 9% of the cartridge cases that they recover are actually yielding results which can actually move an investigation forward. So can be directly compared with an individual who's a suspect, or the scientist can actually comment on the fact that this person could well have contributed to a mixed profile. So by doing that, we do actually get the best results we possibly can from it. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Martin. I have a very interesting question for you at the end. And last but not least, Lauren.
Hi, good morning. Ooh, am I doing that? Okay. Do I?
No, don't put it on for me.
Oh. Sorry, I'm a little nervous. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is the new firearms protocol for Calgary Police. This is brand new for Calgary. We're in the process of building a forensic firearms lab. So prior to May 2011, all firearms evidence was sent to an external forensic lab. In May 2011, we purchased a brass track system, joined the Canadian IBIS network, known as CIBIN, in collaboration with the RCMP, which is our national police force, and hired a full-time examiner. So the goal of this was to have an internal program with a customized service. So with this customized service, what we're talking about is having the flexibility to prioritize our cases giving timely information to investigators, and ensuring that all the firearms evidence is analyzed and getting the most out of it biologically and ballistically. So when we started this program, what we found was that there was a large number of firearms and firearms evidence in our central property room that nothing was ever done with, never sent in for analysis. Turned out that there was a number of investigators that stopped submitting this evidence for analysis in what would be considered a non-critical shooting case, so a drive-by shooting or a possession charge or somewhere where a person wasn't shot. They just weren't sending the evidence in. And what was also interesting was that a found firearm, so a firearm that's wrapped in a bag and thrown in a ditch, that's considered found property, put into the property room, and nothing was ever done with it. So in December 2011, we implemented a new service-wide policy for all of Calgary Police, and that's when we began our forensic analysis of the evidence as well. So this is a look at what that protocol is. So right from the start, now any incident that's involving firearms evidence, whether it be cartridge cases found on the side of the road or up to a homicide, our crime scene unit is called for every incident. They're there to ensure that the evidence is properly handled and properly packaged, and it's brought back to their lab where they fingerprint and DNA swab all of the evidence, the firearms, the magazines, accessories, cartridge cases, and cartridges. At that point, our firearms lab manager is brought into the loop. The idea of this is to have a single location where all of the firearms evidence is filtered through, so all of the evidence can be accounted for, tracked, and ensured that it's now analyzed. So the lab manager consults with the investigator and determines what's the best route for this evidence to get the most out of that evidence. So also with this protocol, we're wanting to maximize the use of our in-house experts. So the evidence, depending on what it is, it could go to our firearms examiner for forensic analysis. It could go to our NWES team, that's uniformed police officers who they do the tracing of the firearm. As well, they're also trained to do the classification of the firearm. Or, in the case of those found guns, they can go directly to our IBIS operator, test-fired and cartridge cases put into IBIS. Also, the evidence that's going to our firearms examiner or to NWES, those cartridge cases are also going into IBIS. What we're also doing, which is new for Calgary Police, is that we're putting IBIS at the start of our analysis. So if we have an incident with a number of cartridge cases, we do, right away, we do initial preliminary screening of those cartridge cases. And based on the class characteristics, we can take a sample of those cartridge cases, put them into IBIS right away. If there's a possible hit, we can verify that immediately, get that information to the investigator so they can continue on with their investigation, and then we can go back and finish our analysis of however many exhibits that we're dealing with. So the future, where we're going, so we are still in the building stage right now. Last summer, the CPS committed to building a complete entire forensic firearms lab. They hired a second firearms examiner, which is where I came in. They hired a dedicated IBIS operator, and by this fall, 2013, will be a full-service firearms lab where all of our firearms evidence will be analyzed in-house, and we're the only municipal lab in the country that's also operating an IBIS system. Thank you.
I have a question for each panel member. I'll start with Lauren, since your voice is all exercised right now. Lauren, what do you think is the most important benefit that the citizens of Calgary get by Calgary Police having their own IBIS system to feed the cyber network?
Well, as I said, because we're a city municipal lab, we're able to have that flexibility to prioritize. So if there is an active shooter on on the loose, and we have those cartridge cases. We're able to put in the IBIS right away, get that information to the investigators within hours. That we have that capability.
And do you find that the rapid turnaround has motivated the investigators to supply you that information, where in the past they were reluctant to submit data?
Yeah, knowing that we're right there has definitely been a benefit.
Thank you. Martin, fast time intelligence caught my eye when it was on the screen. Think about the issue of fast time intelligence and the sharing of IBIS high confidence data with police officers as an investigative lead, as opposed to waiting and holding that for final expert confirmation.
Okay, yeah, perhaps uniquely in NABIS, if we get links on the IBIS system, and you saw the 4 labs on the map, if we were to establish a link between a shooting in Manchester and, say, London, we actually hold all the exhibits at the 4 labs. But obviously, shootings from London will be held at the London lab, shootings from the north of England will be held at the Manchester lab. Having established that link on the IBIS system, we would then confirm that link by, by actually getting the physical exhibits together. But that can sometimes take quite a time. We will do a review on the Matchpoint screen, we will peer review that, and we will send that intelligence out in that form. So you get the intelligence instantly. We won't wait to get the physical items together to give that confirmation. This enables very often, and again it was touched on yesterday, we will actually produce links the same day as an actual homicide. In fact, we did one quite recently where we did just that. We got the cartridge case in at 2 o'clock. Excuse me. Cartridge case in at 2 o'clock, trace evidence recovery done, put on the IBIS system, and the investigator had a result at 5:15.
Thank you. Jeanette, you mentioned the protocol to test fire and for data entry. Is that a formal written policy that affects only your lab, or does it extend to police to do their part also?
The protocol are actually, it's a direction for the police, so they have to follow it.
Do you find that there's follow-up to that? Do you find them being responsive to that directive?
Excuse me?
Do you find the police being responsive to that directive?
Oh, yes, they are. It's most of the time, not all police might know it, but when we inform them, they're happy that they have the directions so they can follow it.
Thank you. Judith, what do you think is the most important thing that you need to do in Jamaica to achieve the degree of success that you're looking for, so that you can get police officers the information they need so they can stop shooters before they can harm more people?
At present, we have what in-house a significant backlog. I think what needs to happen are 2 things. The backlog cases that we have need to be entered into IBIS as soon as possible. And we're also going to have to inform the police officers quicker of the links that have been made, which is why we are developing area, because we want all the information in one place. What happens oftentimes is, for example, with the Taurus pistol that I illustrated, that gun is a gang gun and it has been active over 4 years. So the investigator who started an investigation 4 years ago may have been moved, but it's the same gun that's active 4 years later. That's what we need to do to be able to collect, collate, and correlate the information and then notify them in real time.
Thank you. And General Sabong, I want to see if I have this right, so I'm going to try to explain it, and you tell me if I'm correct. There's an amnesty program that has run in the Philippines, yes. And what this entails is that holders of firearms that may not be registered have the opportunity to bring them in, have them registered, and make those firearms legally recorded, correct?
Yeah. Yes.
And did I hear you say that in the course of individuals bringing those firearms in under the amnesty program, you have found IBIS hits that those firearms had actually been used in crimes?
Yes. Yes.
Now, shifting to the registration program for new firearms, there is a law in place that anyone who registers a firearm must have it test fired, and a test fire entered into your IBIS database.
Yes. Yes. That is the procedure.
And did I see on your slide that you had some IBIS hits to new guns that were registered, that were used in crimes?
Yes, we have.
What criminals certainly are stupid, aren't they? Thank God for stupid criminals. But this goes to show that this happens. This happens. And everyone is a lawful gun owner until the day they're not. Now I open the discussion up for questions to the audience, to the panel, on any panel member, any issue that they've presented. And there's questions.
My question is directed to Jeanette. If I got you very well, you said that you are part of the police as a forensics providing entity and under the Ministry of Justice. So my question is, isn't your partiality or impartiality under the spotlight?
Excuse me, I didn't hear.
Impartiality is your impartiality question because you're part of the police.
Okay.
Are you being viewed as...
Are you biased?
Oh, if you were part,
Because you're part of the police.
yeah.
How can you say that you're independent?
Okay.
You got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We are a part of the police organization, yes. We are authority, operate under the police. But we are an independent laboratory. And of course, we follow, we are an accredited laboratory under the ISO standard 17025. And we have certain protocols for being independent, and it's we can also work for the for private what do you say is customers. So we are aware of that discussion actually, if we are independent or not, but. What do you say? Yeah.
I think you said it.
Yeah.
Let me, allow me to ask a question. How many of you in the audience are employed or direct forensic labs? Please raise your hand. How many of you are employed in a forensic lab or supervise a forensic lab? Hi, I need to see your hands. How many of your labs operate under the police services? A lot. I think it's very common in many places that the laboratory runs, and I understand and appreciate the question, and that's something that's under discussion even in the United States. But I think historically, it's very common to find a lab in the police services. Anyway, Augusto, I know you had a question.
I have a question to Mrs. Lisa Sabong. You mentioned that new weapons have to be provided by owners with one test fire done by them, or test fire is done by you. That's first question. Second question is if you have plans to extend that program to existing weapons in the hands of civilians, or it's just limited to new weapons coming into the country or getting into the hands of new owners?
Currently, we're extending our licensing to civilian owner of the gun.
So
And the first question was, what's the first part of your question?
my first question was, the test fire is done by the owner or is done by the
It
service?
is done by the laboratory, by the
laboratory.
ballistic.
Good. And the second question was
Division.
if you have plans to extend the program beyond new weapons to existing set of registered weapons.
Yes, we do extend to civilian weapons.
My understanding is that when the weapon in possession of the owner comes up for re-registration, the process is taken then. Is
Yes,
that,
yes.
that correct?
Okay, then I would like
The owner should bring the gun, then it is subjected for ballistic testing and stenciling of the serial number of the gun.
Okay, very good. And how frequently is the re-registration taking place? Every how many years?
Oh, today it took only for 2 years.
Every 2 years.
2 years, every 2 years.
Thank you very much.
I thought I saw, yep, there's a hand down in front.
Donc merci pour le panel. On a eu énormément d'informations et d'expertises développées concernant les armes à feu et surtout dans l'approche criminalistique en matière des armes à feu. Ma question s'adresse à Judy. Donc concernant le logiciel AREA qui a été développé par le laboratoire de Jamaïque. Donc ce logiciel, je pense qu'il est très important en termes de détermination, de cartographie d'évolution des armes et des affaires. Est-ce que ce logiciel intègre la base de données EBIS de Jamaïque ou bien c'est un logiciel indépendant qui sert comme moyen de renseignement opérationnel dans le cadre du suivi des affaires liées aux armes à feu? Et également, est-ce que cette base de données prend en compte les données d'affaires complètes en termes d'empreintes digitales, de DNA et d'autres données liées aux affaires des armes à feu? Et merci.
The database was developed with the IBIS system in mind. So the database was developed to maximize the ballistics information being provided by IBIS in terms of the hits, the identity of the guns, the origin of the guns. What we wanted to do then is, because it's not always possible to capture ballistics evidence, or in addition to capturing ballistics evidence, we wanted to expand it into capturing also fingerprints and DNA, but it was designed for ballistics.
I see a question, a couple. There's one in that row, and there's one towards the back. Maybe if that person could just move up. Where do we get you a mic? We've got one question here. We'll get you a mic.
It's a question to all of the panel, and it's picking up on your point, Peter, where you said criminals are stupid. Increasingly, we are recovering telephones and photographs, or indeed Facebook entries, where criminals are demonstrating the weaponry that they hold, often a picture with their hand wearing a particular watch or a tattoo on the hand that links the hand to the criminal and a type of weapon in the hand. I'm interested, from a forensic point of view, how do we mix ballistics forensics with photographic evidence, and have you any case histories where Facebook and social media are starting to feed the evidence and intelligence package in securing convictions?
We've, I mean, it's interesting you say on the Facebook. and I mentioned that the muzzles of guns in people's mouths, that's where we've seen it. But I have, on a few occasions, actually been past the photographs from phones and asked whether the firearms in the photographs are actually genuine firearms or not. And I think all the ballistics experts here will appreciate that's almost an impossible question to answer. But that said, I mentioned the antique weapons. Going through some of the photographs, I've looked at things and said, well, that looks like a 44 Smith & Wesson Russian revolver. I think that's unlikely to be a replica. It's actually quite likely to be a genuine firearm. There are other sorts of firearms that we see in the UK which tend to be unique to UK firearms offences. So again, if I'm looking at a converted bicycle, we call them, again, I would say that is quite likely to be a genuine firearm. But we're giving that information purely on an intelligence basis, and the UK Serious and Organised Crime Agency will also do the same. But we will never give statements or go into court on that because it's just so easy to refute the fact that they're genuine firearms.
In terms of Jamaica, I can't speak to the harvesting of data from Facebook and other social networks because that would be the purview of our National Intelligence Bureau. But I do know for a fact that our digital forensics unit is quite active, and not only do the criminals post these entries on Facebook, they will take pictures of incidents and guns on their mobile phones, and those are being harvested by our digital forensics unit and being presented as evidence in court.
Yeah, and in Sweden we have had a couple of cases where we had a firearm that's been seized, and then we found the pictures from social networks, and then we have investigated, could this be the exact that gun the suspect is holding? And we, the analysts that works with the digital, with images, try to enhance the picture bigger and see if we can find any details on the gun that's individual. For example, if it's any scratches, other marks that's individual for this gun, and try to compare it with the picture itself. And we had a few successes with that if the pictures hold that good quality. But the quality of the mobile phone is sometimes not that good.
The same in Calgary, as Martin said. We've been asked to help more for the intelligence, so we're not going to be going and testifying on that. But more so, investigators, they're not familiar with pretty much anything besides what's on their waist. And so we've had them come and say, what sort of gun am I looking for when I'm going for my search warrant and I'm searching this residence? So we can look at the photo and say, yeah, that looks like a Beretta. So just kind of to guide them when they're then in the house searching for something.
Anyone else on the panel want to address that subject?
For my country in the Philippines, we have a separate unit. Our cybercrime unit conduct the examination and analysis for the guns in the Facebook. So my lab does not do the examination.
There was a question. There he is. Okay, my friend.
Thank you very much. My question is for Judith. Judith, I was wondering if you had done an assessment of your in-house product that you are developing, and if you've looked at the downside of it and how you intend to look at those. Because what readily comes to mind is, for example, if you are sending real-time information to investigators on the field. I mean, to every rule, there's an exception. There's a bad nut there who would probably pass on these information before you could get to the suspects or your culprits.
I did not hear a part of what you said, but in terms of, your question was about assessment of the software and real-time notification, but there was something in between. I missed that.
What I was asking was if you had done an assessment to look at the downsides, and I gave an example of what readily comes to mind, like corrupt officers who would pass on information to these gangs before, because of course, the gangs probably would pay them better than you do. And what measures are you putting in place to get these in check?
Okay. In response to that, what we have in the tier structure that we've developed, the high command view has access to data that wouldn't be passed on or wouldn't be visible to investigators and crime officers. And also, what we have what we're going to do is a secure access. In other words, some of the information that's available, especially if the crime has been flagged as a high profile, in other words, it's linked to a kingpin in the drug underworld or in the a gang lord, the information will be highly restricted. So we would send it to the police high command, but investigators could not see that information. And the police high command will then have to make the judgment call as to who will get access to that. But there's some information that will only be transmitted to the police high command. So we hope that will mitigate the access to some of the information that we have and intelligence by corrupt officers who would exploit that and then inform the criminals.